We've been talking to Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who is the chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the United States Congress.
I like the way that sounds.
It's great.
But you know what, Lester? There's not a bad seat in the House. I don't need to be chair to enjoy this position because I get to help a lot of people in my district. I represent a fairly poor district in the United States, Miami, Florida, South Florida. Everybody thinks of it as rich mansions and lots of money. And yes, there are some rich people in my district, but there are a lot of poor people. So I help them a lot with housing and immigration and a lot of immigration cases. And because I represent a community made up a lot of folks who've come from Venezuela, Colombia, Nicaragua. Cuba is the majority of the folks from my district. So I help them with all kinds of problems, and that gives me a great sense of satisfaction. So it's great to be chairman, but I don't need that.
Moving away from being chairwoman, I can speak for the old people, being a very old hand.
I am there with the old people too.
But you have a lot of retired people in your district. How are they faring now under the present circumstances?
It's difficult. The economic slump that is worldwide, we have not been immune to it in the United States. You who are viewing this know this better than anyone. And South Florida has been especially hit hard, Lester, because construction was a big industry in South Florida. It's a relatively new community. We were building new neighborhoods, expanding out in the west and further south. And now that construction industry has almost come to a halt. Just this week, I met with builders and contractors, and they're telling me that their membership has been cut in half. So half of those construction industries businesses are no longer around. And now that impacts everyone, but especially hard the senior citizens, because that means that the county government and the local governments have less money to give to provide social services and provide that social service net to help the seniors. We're worried about the pending cuts to Medicare and Social Security. These are sacred programs, and we're worried that any cuts will have a grave and serious economic implication for our senior citizens, especially in South Florida. And another big chunk of money that goes to seniors and goes especially to poor seniors is the Community Development Block Grants, CDBG funds. And you know this from the time that you served in Congress. There's a move now to zero them out or to cut them substantially. And what will that mean? That means that many of the elderly shut-ins, of which there are many in South Florida, they depend on this one meal that is served to them at lunchtime. Oftentimes, sadly enough, this is the one meal that they will receive, the only meal that they will receive during the day. And if you cut community development block grants, that means that many of those programs will be endangered. Also, visits to the elderly at their homes and community health centers. So it's a tough time right now to be a senior citizen, and it's an even tougher time to be a senior citizen who's relying on these government programs to sustain themselves. So we're very worried.
How about the job situation there now? You spoke about the construction industry, but there's also undoubtedly many of the ancillary services that used to be provided are being cut.
Absolutely, Lester. This is something that we worry about greatly. American Airlines, for example, which is the fourth largest employer in South Florida, recently declared bankruptcy. They're in negotiations now. Let's see what happens with that airline. That means a lot of people who might have to relocate, who might lose their job. There's a great anxiety over that. And we had a real estate boom in the 80s. A lot of apartments were built. A lot of people had money. They were flush with cash. Now that's no longer there. Thank goodness we still have our pristine beaches and our beautiful coastlines, and the waters are great. Come on down, spend your money in Miami. So tourism remains a big source of our income in Florida. And if the hurricane season goes right this year, as it has in the past, we'll have a great tourist season, because the gas prices are starting to come down a little bit, and people will be back in their cars, and we hope that they'll drive down to Miami and enjoy our beaches. So tourism is doing fairly well. The restaurants are doing all right. But folks who used to work in factories, for example, in the working class neighborhoods of Hialeah that I've represented, those factories have shut down. Many of the manufacturing jobs that we used to have, they are non-existent, and it's a changing economy. It's now we're trying to attract more high-tech companies and more of what will be the jobs of the future. So we think that Florida has a good economic climate for businesses to relocate there, because our taxes are pretty stable, they're low, and we offer a lot of incentives to have people come down. So we hope that there's a brighter future, but right now I really can't say that it's looking good.
Well, you know, when I served here, had a difficulty in trying to, being a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and Chairman of Asia, I had difficulty in trying to balance off my international responsibilities, my responsibilities nationally on the committee, and then at home. How do you do that?
Well, let me tell you why it's not as difficult for me, because it really depends on the area that you represent. You know South Florida, Lester. We are an international community. We call Miami the gateway to the Americas and the Caribbean. So when we talk about international issues in South Florida, they're domestic issues, because I represent, of course, people who are born here and reared here, and that they are 100% from many generations back Americans, but I represent folks who are 100% Americans but come from other lands, people from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and Brazil. So when I talk about foreign affairs, in my district, people are interested, not because I'm talking about it, but they're interested in the subject. So it's not a stretch for me because of the cosmopolitan international flavor, the diverse cultures that we have in South Florida. For example, what is going on with Haiti right now? Are U.S. funds being used properly? Are we getting private sector to be involved in Haiti's reconstruction? Well, we represent in South Florida thousands of the Haitian diaspora, meaning Haitians who are now calling South Florida home. And Venezuela, what is Hugo Chavez, that nutcase, up to now? What is he doing with Iran? I represent thousands of Venezuelans, so that's domestic issues for them, and of course Cuba and all of Central America. So, and Israel continues to be a great passion for my community as well. So I'm blessed to represent a very cultured, sophisticated, intelligent, and cosmopolitan South Florida, where I don't have to talk them into being interested in international affairs. It's the bread and butter issues. That's for them domestic affairs.
Are we spending enough time, however, on our Latin American affairs in contrast to what is happening in the rest of the world? We take the Latino for granted, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, and because we ignore Latin America, we have this problem that I alluded to in the beginning of the program, of the growing presence of Iran in the Western Hemisphere. It's amazing, the tour of tyrants that I called it. Ahmadinejad went to Venezuela, to Cuba, to Nicaragua, to Bolivia, to Ecuador, and they're trying to get more contracts signed, and there's a lot of exchanges between these countries, and it's a way for Iran to go around our sanctions policy, and they're making real inroads into South America. So we've got to pay attention to that, and I think that we ignore the growing threat of Iran in the Western Hemisphere at our own peril. So I'm paying a lot of attention to it, and we've had hearings and briefings on this very important issue.
Are you getting enough cooperation from the administration on what you're doing?
Well, we have different points of view. views on this. President Obama said just the other day that he does not consider Venezuela to be a problem for national security concerns of our country. I think that Venezuela is a national security threat. We've seen their way that they've tried to help the FARC, a guerrilla movement in Colombia that is made up of drug traffickers, destroy that beautiful country. We see the influence of Iran, and so we're worried about Venezuela. We have different points of views about what is a national security threat.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking time out from a very busy schedule and in a very important position in our nation today.
Well, you are very nice. Lester, I've been doing these shows with you for a while.
Many years.
And congratulations. This is the longest running public affairs show that has not stopped in the nation. 35 years and counting.
Right. Well, we hope it will continue for a long time
like
to come. Thanks again
Thank you,
for
Lester.
being with us. And now until next week at the same time, this is Lester Wolff saying so long from Washington.